for the topic tonight was to explore maybe some short and some long-term effects of what I think is going to happen with ChatGPT in particular. I know AI is a much wider topic than just ChatGPT, but I think it's worth separating out these two things. And I'm going to try to make a case for that tonight. I was hoping we do something a bit practical because Imo said, you know, we try a bit practical. So I do have a challenge at the end. I'm going to talk a bit, and then I was hoping we split into groups and then try something. We'll see if it works out or not. Anyway, I think kind of there's an interesting change coming to our industry, and it's going to be driven by reducing the cost of work, and it's going to be driven by how much a single person can do on their own. And I think these are really interesting topics to explore. I kind of grabbed this picture. I created it using DALL-E from ChatGPT, asking it to create a Soviet-era poster for AI taking the jobs of developers. And that's what I got. So I don't know, this is like a sad developer looking at a robot who's doing something. And I'm looking at this from two perspectives. One perspective is a developer. I've kind of been writing code for as long as I know, and I started writing software for fun when I was 6. I never wanted to do anything else in my life. I'm looking at this also from a perspective of a small business owner, that in theory should be paying developers, but I'm not. I'm on my 3rd company at the moment. The first was a total disaster. It was about 15 years ago. We had 6 or 7 developers. We had a business analyst, we had a tester, we had marketing people, we had investors, we had an HR person, and everything. And there was a total train wreck. I built a second company in 2013 with 2 friends. It's kind of a money printing machine. It's really nice. It doesn't print a lot of money, but it prints some money every month. And we spend about 1 hour on it a month. And it kind of just keeps chugging away and printing money. That's really nice. And kind of the 3rd thing I've done on my own completely. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. It's been really interesting to try and see the change, because I think what a single person can do now is the job of like 20 other people 10 years ago and 15 years ago. And I think that's a trend that's going to continue. And a lot of the kind of doomsayers in kind of talking about AI and things, that they're not talking about how developers are going to be eliminated by the AI, but how a single person will be effectively doing the job of a business analyst, tester, database developer, front-end developer, system administrator, and a bunch of other things. And that we're going to get a lot more cross-functional, which I think is an interesting kind of circle back, because kind of you know, there were no specialist testers and business analysts when people get started. So anyway, just for context, kind of the thing I built, and I'm going to kind of show you a couple of references for that, is a tool that helps people create videos easily. And it started off, you know, on my second product. I was the person doing marketing videos, and I'm really bad at it. So I wanted to automate it, and I built something that takes a markdown file like this. It has kind of some, you know, video references, has some images and things like that, and then uses text-to-speech to create a video. So it ended up being a product on its own. It has a couple of million users a month now. There's about 200,000 conversions done per day. And I'm basically the only person doing it. I'm the pre-sales guy, the support guy, the sales guy, the product manager, the developer, the tester, operations, and everything else. And it's incredible how much a single person can do that. That's a really interesting thing. So looking at that from that perspective, I've kind of tried to integrate it with ChatGPT. lots of my customers are using ChatGPT now to generate content and then using my service to produce the next step. So I thought, well, maybe bring it together. Applied to get a plugin there. You need to apply. I was whitelisted, which was really good. And then I built a plugin that allows people to do something in ChatGPT. The way ChatGPT interacts with you as an interface is really interesting. You need to provide a couple of functions, and basically you give it a API. So you can reply back in Markdown. So I hope I don't need to introduce ChatGPT. I assume everybody here knows what ChatGPT is. Okay. So basically, you give it some data coming into request. I run a conversion. That's the magic. And then I reply with a bunch of Markdown. And it renders, hey, we've downloaded your file. We've created your file. Use this download URL to download your audio. Brilliant. Now, the purpose why I was doing this is to bring ChatGPT to my system to pay me. And I thought, well, a good way to do that is to mimic what is on the website, where people can do some things for free, but then when they exceed the limit, they have to come and pay. So I created this, if your request is longer than a limit, then go into the else block and say this request is too big, blah, 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 come here, click, and then you can pay and things like that. Started testing this. Short one, good. Long one. ChatGPT said, looks like this request is too long. He didn't reply with my error message. He started replying with his own error message. He says, look, this request is too long. Would you like me to split it into smaller requests? He said, yes. And kind of split it into smaller requests and execute it within the free tier. And kind of replied back. And I was like, this is insane. It figured out how to abuse the system on its own. It figured out how to give people something I didn't want to give it them. And it figured out all this thing in my first interaction with it. So I killed the plugin. I never released the plugin. But I thought this is amazing. It's much smarter than your average outsourcer. It can do things I've never thought about it can do. And I was really kind of, surprised, excited, appalled at the same time, because I hoped I was going to be able to make money from this, but I wasn't. And it was kind of, I felt totally shocked in a sense. And I read about something similar happening in the world of art. There was a painting called the Space Opera Theater that won the first award at the Colorado State Fair. It looks like this. And actually, it turns out it was made by AI. It was made by Midjourney. And when kind of they realized it was made by Midjourney, they didn't know if they should kind of take the award away or not, and things like that. But look, this is I never in my life would I be able to paint something like this, or kind of, I assume most people in the room. So then we have kind of really the whole problem of this is automating not just the jobs of developers away, it's going to automate much larger. And there's a strike ongoing in Hollywood at the moment where writers are complaining about having to collaborate with AI. They're saying that they're getting paid a certain amount of money for writing original content, and they're getting paid a lot less money for revising content. And what the studios are doing is they're doing a first pass through AI, and then they're telling the kind of writers, now revise this, which is a lot less money, and kind of a bunch of other things. It's, they have a big union. They are kind of all unionized up in the US, which is really insane, because if you think about it, like, unions were supposed to win in the Soviet Union, but now they're winning in the US. But should developers unionize? Should we kind of think about doing this? Because the cat is out of the bag in a sense, and it's a big question. What do we do with that, and how do what the effect of this is going to be on our work? So kind of one of the things that's kind of really interesting, and this was from March, when they announced GPT-4, there was a demo by OpenAI where basically the co-founder of OpenAI took a piece of paper, drew a wireframe on a piece of paper, and added some labels, added some buttons, and then kind of uploaded that image. And the thing created an HTML website with working JavaScript and everything out of a hand-drawn wireframe. Now, this is not yet publicly available. You can't yet do this. They have the technology, it's just not open to everybody. And it's probably that it can do that one website. You know, I was reading about like when Garmin produced the first GPS, they were testing it on getting the path from the airport to their office, right? And then when the investors came in, they kind of, you know, let the GPS drive the investors from the airport to their office. So it's probably kind of, you know, cooked for this specific case, but I think it's amazing that we can now go from a hand-drawn picture to HTML and JavaScript with some kind of AI doing it. And a good friend of mine, his daughter is in the university, and she was, like all students, kind of is into climate activism and things like that. And she built this up for helping people do small tasks that contribute to the environment. And he called me saying, oh, you know, she built this up on her own. She got stuck with a couple of things. Can you maybe help? I'm not a developer, you are. And I said, yeah. So I spoke to the girl, and she basically got this whole thing going with Firebase and cloud technology and things like that. And the only thing she couldn't do is she couldn't kind of get the data back when something's changed, and she didn't really understand JSON or HTTPS or networks or anything like that. And she was stuck on something that's kind of relatively easy to fix. So kind of, you know, we fixed it. And I said, well, you know, this is interesting. How long did it take you to do this? And she said, oh, you know, at least a week. I'm like, what? It's going to do like it will take me 6 months to start thinking about this. And you built it in a week. Like, how? Without, you know, even knowing what the underlying protocols are and things like that. So I think, you know, that even a couple of years ago, the stack has kind of increased a lot. And with something like this, who knows what we'll be able to do in you know, a very short period of time. So kind of, you know, of course, this is not the first time we've been in this situation. And looking at, you know, the age of the average person in the room, you probably all remember case tools. You remember kind of all of these things that I remember at least 3 things that were supposed to completely replace developers in my career, and kind of it never really happened. We're still here. And all these, you know, like nobody's using case tools anymore, but we're still here. But at the same time, the nature of our work has changed. Like one of my more useless skills throughout history was when I was doing hand-optimized assembly for graphics on a 386. I'm proud to have been able to code assembly better than the C++ compiler was at that time. And then Whatcom 8.5 came out on 80 floppy disks. I installed it. It took me a whole night to install. And then I ran it, and it was able to beat me, and I felt really depressed. But yeah, Whatcom doesn't exist anymore. I still exist. And so it's you know, these are engineering tools that are helping us do stuff better. They're not necessarily replacing what we do. But at the same time, I think how we do things changes, and we're kind of lifting things up the stack. So this has been kind of going on through forever. And I found a reference in a book called The Computer from Pascal to von Neumann, where they're talking about how in 1869 was the first known attempt by anybody to make first known successful attempt by anybody to make a machine that was able to solve a complicated problem faster than a human. So, you know, people have been trying to replace other people with faster technology forever. And the machine in question is called the logic piano. It looks amazing. And it looks like this. It's called the logic piano because you can see some kind of pedals there. All of these things are kind of ABCDs and things like that. So the computing power of this is not necessarily amazing in today's standards, but in 1869 it must have been insane. And this is kind of, you know, a Greek demigod looking William Jevons who designed it, and he himself was aware that it looks ridiculous. Even for that age, it looked ridiculous. And he called it a reasoning machine. And he said, well, I call something a reasoning machine, it's as likely going to be ridiculed and laughed at as it is going to be admired. And I think if you look at all the posts about ChatGPT or everything people are talking about, it is as likely to be ridiculed as it is to be admired. And we're back to this kind of logic piano. Jevons, of course, is famous not for constructing logical machines. He's famous for work as an economist. I think in 1869, if you were anything, then you were everything. Kind of people were doing all of the stuff at the same time. So Jevons wrote this wonderful book called The Principles of Economics. And The Principles of Economics is popular today mostly because of something called the Jevons paradox. And Jevons in Principles of Economics was analyzing coal usage in Britain and the efficiency of coal use and fuel use. And he was kind of confused by his findings that as they were finding more effective ways of using coal mining wasn't dropping. Coal mining was increasing, which was, he expected something completely different. So Jevons' paradox is basically, he said that if we suppose that using more economically fuel will lead to diminished consumption is a confusion. The contrary is the truth. There's lots of ways to paraphrase this today, but basically it's when people figure out a way to more efficiently do something, instead of doing less of it, they do it more. That's kind of, and I think that's probably what's going to happen with uploading a hand-drawn image to ChatGPT. I don't think we're going to be creating fewer websites. We're going to be creating more and more websites and things like that. And I think this is similar to my understanding, at least. I was a kid when this happened, so I wasn't part of the industry of kind of moving from people in suits developing on mainframes to people developing on PC computers, where all of a sudden the cost of development dropped, the accessibility of people to computing power dropped, and now we had many more people developing. And I think when we talk about kind of AI replacing developers, and not necessarily replacing, but again, the nature of the work is going to change. I read in what was it called? The Dream Machine, sorry, The Dream Machine, a book about the history of computing, the early history, where somebody proposed to John von Neumann that they create what effectively would be an assembler. And he said, don't be crazy. We are not going to get an expensive scientific machine to do the work of humans. It's kind of clerical work. Humans should be doing that. But then, you know, the people in the lab coats were replaced by the people in the suits. And people in lab coats must have been appalled to see the developers are kind of working in suits and things like that. And then people in suits were replaced by people in t-shirts. People in suits were appalled that, you know, people in t-shirts were developing. And, you know, you can see the progression of that. And I'm proud to say that working on my own, I do my best work in my underwear. So I don't know what the next stage of that is. But we are democratizing this, and I think I read a research a couple of years ago where the number of developers is going to quadruple over the next 10 years. And I was like, how are you going to train them? Where are you going to find the universities? Who's going to educate them? And he said, no, but you're not thinking about developers in the right sense. You know, many more people will be developing and interacting with this. So kind of this is, I think, what kind of the thing is going to be with the Jevons paradox. Now, you can see this immediately, like within a gold rush. This is the data from the last batch of companies Y Combinator financed, startups emerging in the AI space in particular. And these people are doing something called AI ops, which is basically selling shovels in a gold rush. They are not creating their own kind of application of AI. They are helping other people do AI. And kind of pretty much, you know, I spoke to a number of people from big banks and big insurance companies. Everybody wants to build their own internal ChatGPT now. And somebody's going to help them operate this. Somebody's going to sell shovels. Then we have developer tools that are kind of using AI, which is, again, selling shovels and things like that. And then it's a bunch of other kind of types of companies. And as soon as kind of, you know, these companies are launching, they're also going away. There's like this year, Jasper started firing people. Jasper took $150 million investment at $1.2 billion valuation a couple of years ago. And now they were a a smarter interface on top of ChatGPT 3.5. ChatGPT 4 came out. Gone. Yellow AI was another kind of startup that was going to revolutionize ordering and order management. All of a sudden, started firing people and things. So we are at the moment, like the industry is in an insane kind of situation where these things are emerging and dying like crazy. And I think, again, that's similar to the PC revolution. It's similar to all these kind of smaller companies starting. Some of them became Microsoft. Some of them became kind of boring, then they disappeared. And who knows what's going to happen? But what's really interesting, again, going back to ChatGPT its own, is kind of one of the things that ChatGPT provides is kind of this general purpose tool and general entry point that people have to learn once. Bruce Tonazzini, who used to be a designer at Microsoft, defined this kind of UX law of commuting, where he says kind of basically the time people have to do a task is fixed. Only the distance they cover during that time is changing. So you have an hour to do your accounts. You're going to do the accounts the best you can in an hour. If you can finish it in half an hour, you're going to spend the rest of an hour fiddling around with the numbers and then break something and things like that. Kind of the there was this kind of fake rephrasing of the second law of thermodynamics that work expands to fill in available time. And if there's not enough time, we'll do a half-baked job of it, but if there is, we'll do more. And this is where general purpose tools become really interesting, because with the general purpose tool, you learn it once, the time it takes to learn and do a new task is significantly reduced. And by having a general purpose tool instead of a specific tool, people are kind of being able to do more in the same amount of time. So, for example, there was this is a couple of days ago, ChatGPT started allowing people to upload PDFs, Excels, and a bunch of other things, and then ask questions about that. All of the, immediately, like a million other startups that were working on that space, their business case is gone. Because this thing has 100 million users, they know how to use the tool, they know how to query this thing, and they're going to be working on that interface, not something else. And that's why I think kind of general purpose tools like this are kind of, first of all, replacing a lot of work that would have been done by programmers. If you had a financial company that needs somebody to analyze some spreadsheets or something like that, you no longer need to program it. It's going up the stack. Somebody can just upload the spreadsheet into this and start asking questions. But at the same time, extracting data from PDFs, doing things like that. At the same time, I said, startups that are doing this are going to die quickly. So, kind of with this general purpose thing, basically, what this reminds me of is VisiCalc. VisiCalc was the first, to my knowledge, general purpose software tool that allowed people to do stuff that they were not able to do before, much faster, much better. This is kind of late 70s, killer app for kind of the Apple computers, and now all of these kind of Apple computers are here because somebody was smart enough to build VisiCalc so Apple could make money. Kind of the value VisiCalc brought wasn't kind of the computation. People could do computation before, but it was like an interface people need to learn once, and then they can use it for many different purposes. There was a very nice interview on the Quartz website with Dan Bricklin, who was the inventor of VisiCalc. And he said, people would tell me like when this thing appeared, they would spend an hour doing something that usually took a day, and then they would take a day off, and everybody thought they were kind of magicians, but they were able to do stuff much faster. And then, kind of a few years later, people are no longer kind of taking the rest of the day off. You knew that it takes an hour to do this task, so now you get a lot more work to do. Again, the distance changes, the time is fixed. And people started using Excel and VisiCalc and things like that for weird stuff that nobody thought about, like planning the position of beds in hospitals and things like that. There's an even Japanese guy who like draws paintings in Excel, and kind of when you zoom out, it looks like a painting and things like that. So I think that's kind of probably where this is going to go, where one general purpose tool is going to win. Or one general purpose style of interface is going to win. And then when people are used to that, we'll start opening up use cases that nobody thought about. So kind of that's why Jupyter and things like that are I think, closer to the purpose of where we're going and what we're doing instead of kind of replacing developers. I don't know if you're familiar with Jupyter or not, but basically all the data scientists everywhere are using it. And these are people who are programming, happily ignoring everything that our industry has invented in the last 50 years. These are people who are programming without a care in the world about version control, automated testing, continuous integration. Any kind of stuff like that was an entry-level ticket kind of for development 10 years ago. These people are completely ignoring it, but really, really happy with it. And they're incredibly productive. And this is where I think, again, the nature of the work is changing. And then we can start thinking about, well, why do we have continuous integration? We have continuous integration because it takes 20 people to do something. What if it doesn't take 20 people? If it takes one person to do it, do we still need continuous integration? Do we need version control if your program can fit into 3 sentences? I mean, I don't know, you can write it again.
The aspects of security with AI.
Of course you have, you don't know, so it's a, yes, there's a, what are you thinking about in terms of security? There's lots of different aspects to it.
Well, I mean, it's like from a corporate kind of standpoint, you know, putting your corporate data into that, you now share it with a third party. That's a security risk.
Okay, it's, of course, and then, you know, again, you have the same risk with the cloud, but lots of companies are on the cloud. So at some
like, you know, they've only just started to be like trustworthy, whereas obviously,
yeah, that's
Microsoft or, you know, Apple, they've only just built it over time to be.
Yeah, and then again, over time, this is going to kind of build up and things like that. So I'm not saying this is going to happen tonight, but it's something that
I'd like to ask how much you trust it.
How much I trust it. So that's a really interesting question.
The reason I ask is because I've attended a lot of AI events lately. And one person more knowledgeable than me said that ChatGPT only does one thing. It makes stuff up.
Absolutely.
It has no understanding of the word it is using.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Hence the celebrated case now in New York.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about, everybody cites as the case why you can't trust ChatGPT with certain tasks. Maybe some you can, but I mean, I just I read some stories of children using it at school and then turning away from it, saying it got all the answers wrong.
So now you know, that's one of the fundamental questions I'm going to talk about. But that's really kind of, you know, there was a case. I don't know if when you said the case in New York, if you're talking about that lawyer who created the lawsuit, there was an open and shut
lawsuit. He submitted a submission in a litigation case to the court, citing using ChatGPT, which cited 9 fictitious precedents.
And did it twice, not once, but twice.
Into big trouble with the judge.
Yes, did it twice. You know, when asked by the judge to explain the references, went to ChatGPT again. and so yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of trust is a major issue there. And it's ChatGPT at the moment is just a bullshit generator that generates stuff it doesn't understand, very much like 90% of outsourcing developers. So you know, is it better or worse? That's an interesting question. So it's not trustworthy. But again, these are things that once the technology is there, I you know, will improve. And the interesting question is, what can we do with that, and what can we expect? And that's actually, you know, part of what I was going to challenge you to do later. So that's a very nice thing. Let's come back to that. So anyway, I think. The way the industry is being democratized, I think, is a logical consequence and logical progression from things like this, where many more people will be developing software. Some will do it well, some will do it not so well, like now. And there's going to be some interesting things to think about, the constraints of trustworthiness or, you know, security and things like that. You know, it's all these startups that are starting up in the space of AI ops. They're Most of them offering a way to run this stuff on your data without going out. So that, that is a thing. Verifiability is also a thing. I know Microsoft is trying to work on that, and Google is trying to work on that, so you can kind of verify the content. These are things we can, bolt on top of the technology. Now the cat is out of the bag. So kind of, which brings me to the next thing, and that's Larry Tesler's law of conservation of complexity. Tesla said that basically you can't eliminate complexity. We're trying as an industry to eliminate complexity, but that's a fool's errand. You can only move complexity around. So there's some amount of complexity. You can kind of make the user interface more complex and then the backend simpler, or you can do the other way around, but it's kind of the complexity is there. And when we have kind of this kind of stuff, the really interesting thing happens when we think about this, even in the process. Like there's some inherent complexity in the process of developing software. We can move it around. We can shift.
I would submit that actually that's often buried by the amount of artificial complexity that's there.
Oh yeah, I mean, of course, there's like this whole accidental complexity and essential complexity, and now we can get into, there's a whole stack of turtles down where we can talk about, again, do we really need 200 people for this project? And things like that, and the amount of complexity that's generated by that. But anyway, so with the amount of complexity in the process, the interesting thing is where the complexity shifts. And one of the things that started happening with my product recently is the complexity started shifting towards me in ways I don't like. Driven by these things. So one of the things I allow people to do is because, the videos are made from Markdown and things like that, and you can do text to speech. Some people wanted to automate that. I gave them an API, and there's reasonably good API documentation. There's reasonably good examples. Most of the time, kind of, if people ask questions about that, it used to be good questions. But I got a question from one person saying, oh, this thing just doesn't work. It's broken. Whatever I do, it's broken. I'm not getting through the authorization thing. How do I, do this? And I said, well, can you send me your code? It's difficult for me to judge this. And he sent me fucking screenshots because these people don't understand that code is text. They're using Jupyter. They're kind of, how? But okay, doesn't matter. I got a screenshot. That's the way to share code. Hopefully not to deploy to production, but
At least it wasn't a photo of a screen.
It wasn't a photo of a screen. Yes, so I got a screenshot, and I'm looking at this, and he says, "Do you see anything wrong with this?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, a couple of things. First of all, my data format isn't JSON. You need to post Markdown. Second thing is, this voice does not exist. You've invented the name of a voice that doesn't exist. The third thing is this API endpoint. The domain is mine. The API endpoint doesn't exist." That's why you're getting unauthorized, because you're calling a URL. There's nothing on that URL. And you're using a type of authentication that we don't use. You're sending me bearer auth where we're using API keys. So I create a nice reply to this. I say, well, this code is wrong. Here's an example on GitHub. Maybe don't use bearer auth, use API keys and things like that. A day later, I got an email like this, and it said, "Oh, I'm trying to do this. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. What do I do? What do I do? And what's wrong with this?" And I'm like, "Well, first of all, another endpoint doesn't exist. It's in my domain, but it doesn't exist." And then again, bearer auth. So this is now a reproducible error. This is not a one-off problem. This is, a support issue where, again, I'm the single person in the company. So when I need to spend time on support, I can't do other things. This is an operational issue.
Maybe that was a computer talking to you.
Interesting. So and these two different people, and I'm saying, well, this looks very similar to another problem, kind of another user had. Where am I getting this? Do I have a documentation problem on my website? Is it some third-party website where this is published so I can fix it? This is wrong. And the lady said, well, it's kind of it doesn't matter, but kind of I can't figure this thing out. I tried multiple times, and I said, well, what have you tried multiple times? And she said, I created a second API key and was still denied, and her code says bearer API key with underscore like text. It's not even putting the API key she created.
Yeah.
It's like, what the fuck's going on here, man? Like, how? Why? Where? How did you get this code? And she said, well, I asked ChatGPT how to use your API.
Ah,
So yes, trust.
Well, it's also the secondary question that comes to this. I'm not a technical person at all, but I've been involved in software development. And one of the things you do with it is you test it. And you test it against expected outcome.
Yes.
So how do you test for an expected outcome when you don't know what that outcome is going to be?
That's well, you test by bothering me by email and saying, oh, it's right, it's wrong, fix it for me.
Yeah.
So you offload the complexity to somebody else, and then, but yeah, I think we are going to be having to kind of figure out how to do testing, how to do version control, how to do kind of reproducible builds, how to do all of these other things that people are now forgetting.
The great movement for AI that I see is that people are using it for efficiency without understanding or even knowing that efficiency is the false god.
Yes.
True God is effectiveness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And many people don't know that there is a difference or what that difference is.
Mm.
And as a consequence, they will get fooled and tripped up by AI, which doesn't care.
Absolutely. But I fully agree with you. I think this is not just a problem of AI. This is a problem of, like a couple of years ago, there was a project by the NHS that cost 11 billion that was canned. Like the examples of these are like every week there's a new example of some shitty software done by people who don't understand what they're doing. They're not testing it. They're not, and the thing is, by doing this, we're just speeding up the thing. It's a garbage in, garbage out queue that will speed up. You've mentioned efficiency, effectiveness, and things like that. One of the things I really like is a terminological comparison comes from Peter Nau's paper on programming as theory building. Peter Nau wrote this paper a while ago, and he talked about how one of the most important tasks when we're building a software system is to build a theory of the world, because we're kind of modeling a theory of the world by doing this. And here's this kind of really interesting terminological distinction there. I'm slightly going off track, but it doesn't matter. It's a small group, and we can kind of talk about this. He makes a distinction between intellectual and intelligent behavior. Another kind of one of these things. And he says intelligent behavior is something where given certain instructions, somebody can follow diligently what the instructions say. Most developers are able to do that. Most monkeys are able to do that if you kind of incentivize them enough and things like that. And he's talking about kind of intellectual behavior as meta level cognition, thinking about the process, thinking about the why, thinking about the effectiveness and things like that. And I think, this is like artificial intelligence, not artificial intellect. It's very quickly and diligently going through stuff that somebody told it to do. And that's kind of really interesting, but kind of, even at this point, my first example was something that's a lot smarter than the average outsourcer. This is like as stupid as an average outsourcer without a lot of kind of intelligence. Yeah? And this is like, I think what we're getting is kind of accidental as a service. Or Accenture as a service. So we are going to get, these products where big consultancy have been employing thousands of people to do shit that just doesn't work. It is going to be done a lot faster but not cheaply. Faster.
Fast shit. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So kind of there was lots of these lots of these solution providers are now launching their own kind of AI copilots and things like that. Amazon launched something called Code Whisperer that is generating code a month ago. And what these large organizations do when they launch a new product is they usually find a launch partner. A launch partner is somebody who's going to kind of co-sign the marketing stuff. And they'll say that they've already been using this thing for 6 months, although it didn't exist. And they're going to claim that they got some amazing benefits, so a press release could look nicer. And the Code Whisperer press release basically said they have already done this at Accenture, of course. And Accenture is using the Code Whisperer. And by using Code Whisperer, they were able to reduce the development efforts by 30%. Kind of, you've just fucking admitted that 1/3 of your developers can be replaced by a chatbot.
By 6 months.
Well, chatbots, it's matrix
It's
multiplication.
matrix multiplication. Okay. So, but they do have some kind of interesting claims in the paper. They talk about how the reason why kind of this was done is, first of all, they were able to onboard people to new projects easier. Because instead of spending human time on telling a colleague who's new how to do stuff, you could get the kind of chatbot to tell him or her. Then kind of they're talking about a generative for boilerplate code, where yes, you can kind of evaluate the quality of the code yourself, but we just, like typing getters and setters in Java, nobody does that anymore. You generate boilerplate, and this can generate kind of more complex boilerplate. But the next thing was interesting. Kind of they talked about how people were able to benefit from Code Whisperer by being able to work in unfamiliar languages and environments. So you know Python, you don't know JavaScript. It helps you program JavaScript. Helps you learn faster. And detecting vulnerabilities is a really interesting one because they were able to kind of spot common problems and issues in the code by kind of letting the code whisperer review it based on a database of bugs, database of errors, database of code vulnerabilities. So it was detecting similar things. And this is interesting because I like a really interesting case of this. A while ago, I saw kind of now people are bombarding me with ChatGPT and pushing complexity onto me. Maybe I can, shift some complexity out to ChatGPT as well. I got an email from an API user, this time a person with a brain, thankfully, and somebody who's able to do intellectual work, not just intelligent. And he said, basically, I've been exploring blah, blah, blah. I have this Flutter flow thing. I couldn't find an example in Flutter. There's no documentation on it. How to use my tool from Flutter. I tried doing it, but it kind of ran into some binary stuff. I don't know what to do. And I said, well, other people are asking ChatGPT how to use my system in programming languages. Wow, I'll ask it about Flutter. So I said, ChatGPT, here is the API call. Write me a Flutter kind of script programming thing that kind of uses this API. And ChatGPT said, well, I can't do this because Flutter is a UI toolkit. You can't really talk to the network from a UI toolkit. It doesn't make sense. But Flutter uses Dart as a programming language. Would you like me to create an example in Dart? But yes. Good. and create an example in Dart, and now I had a good starting point. I could spend 10 minutes searching this online. Now I had a good starting point, and I don't know anything about Dart. Dart is, a unfamiliar programming language for me. It was a new environment. Took me like 10 minutes to wire up a Docker container that can execute Flutter, so I can experiment with this. And when I looked at the code it generated, this is what it generated. I found that it was trying to do a form encoded post instead of doing a binary post. But I could look at this and I could see what's wrong. I can't write Dart, but I can read it. I can see that you shouldn't be using form encoded, you should be using binary. And I said, look, instead of form encoded on this line, use binary. It rewrote it. It compiled, it ran, and I have an example on GitHub now how to use this in Dart. Happy customer. And this is what I'm saying, I should be, as a small business owner, paying a Dart developer to do this for me. Or I should be then, spending time to learn Dart and things, but I didn't, because it's a one-off thing. I did it like this, and everybody's happy. And this is amazing. I can trust it because I've run it, I've tested it, I've built it, but it would have taken me much longer to do it on my own, searching through kind of documentation. This was much quicker. So that's why I think a single person is going to be able to do a lot more. So kind of, again, we have historical precedents of this. The New Path Monthly Journal 1865 has this wonderful famous article where they were talking about this new thingamajig called a photographic camera and how it's rubbish. Because it's rubbish, it's kind of, art and photography, it will never be able to do art. And, there's like a complaint that it will never be able to, it's not accurate. You can't trust it. It's, you know, and it's only good for learning. Maybe, you know, you take a photo and then you kind of can draw on top of it and learn stuff. This is 1865, and then, you know, people found more and more interesting use cases for photography. And now we can, you know, get our faces scanned by the police everywhere we go, and things like that. This is amazing. You know, nobody thought that this was done. Plus, when you think about this now, like, you don't necessarily think about the painting being more correct than a photograph. A photograph is more correct than a painting now. And this is why, again, why I think we shouldn't be dismissing these things on the face of not being correct enough, and things like that. It's technology, it will improve. You know, give it 10 years, 15 years, who knows, you know, what we'll see. Because these are all kind of technological things we can fix up. So I think we shouldn't really be discarding this stuff yet. And kind of Bruce Tonazzini, again, talks law. And Tesla's paradox, they combine each other. And there's a talks paradox applied to Tesla's law is basically when you deliver something to your users, they come up with weirder ways of using your software. When you give them an option to do something, they'll do something you didn't expect, and they'll come up with more and more complex use cases. And I think that he says, you know, that breaks Tesla's law of the conservation of complexity, because the complexity is not conserved, it's increased. We're creating more complex processes as a result of having Excel. Or, you know, so what I think is going to happen is we'll come up with more interesting use cases given this stuff. It's all, yes, it can generate code, and yes, it can reply to basic questions, but what are some interesting new things that we're not even thinking about now? What are the more complex use cases?
So like today, I think it's more the case of impersonation.
Mm-hmm.
How we can program the AI bot using, let's say, previous emails, for example, and say, try and, you know, become this person and write how they are. And we've had that like today with our company, where someone was impersonating someone else, but it looked how he would write and whatnot. And I think they've been using like, you know, AI to do that.
And they can do that at scale now. They were not able to do that at scale. I mean, you know, my product, one of the things it does, and I get a nice chuckle every time I call my bank, because HSBC has been pushing people for 15 years to do voice ID. The first time they did it, they said, oh, this is perfectly safe. And I said, no, fuck, it's not safe. I mean, how can you claim it's safe? You have no idea of you know, the limits of the technology. There was actually a case where a BBC journalist 10 years ago, who has a twin brother, got his twin brother to phone up the bank and got all the way through to the account. But now you can get like you can clone text-to-speech voices with minutes of material. It used to be hours of material. You can now, like 10, 15 minutes of material is enough to clone a voice. You know, I've been doing talks like this. There's recordings of me on YouTube. It's trivial easy for somebody to kind of just, you know, get this shitty Bond villain voice and blackmail people on the phone. I don't know. So I think going back to what I was going to talk about is you will get more complex use cases that people are not even thinking about. You know, you know, impersonate this person, but maybe write the code in the style of this person, or, you know, write some test cases the way this guy would think about these test cases, or something like that. And I was part of like a secret product launch a couple of months ago. A company was built a tool that kind of starts resembling Excel, where you have multiple cells and one cell can refer to another cell, and then you can program it using AI. You can say, you know, take whatever is in this cell and then do something with that. So I thought, you know, I'm quite passionate about software testing and things like that. And I thought, well, I'm going to try it on this. And I said, you know, this cell is going to be software code. In this cell, give me 20 good test cases for this software. In this cell, write me some JavaScript unit test based on these test cases. In this cell, give me something that you did not think about over there. And just for fun, I said, in this one, give me an image of these test cases. And kind of generated a fake browser screenshot of, you know, somebody testing this stuff. So we are going to get more and weirder use cases for this that nobody thinks about. And the programming for this was literally, I typed in some text. It wasn't even like in Excel you do equals and then you have to remember what order of parameters is for like 2-column formulas and things like that. This will like, hey, take this stuff and do something with that. And can I trust it? I don't know. It came up with some test cases. Are they the perfect test cases? Probably not. Are they as good as an average tester would do? I don't know. Maybe. So that's an interesting thing to think about. So kind of some of the things that I'm thinking about as potentially what would go next is asking it to do code reviews. There's already people using chatbots and ChatGPT to like, hey, explain this code for me, or apply whatever heuristics you have. And I think this is going to be especially interesting when you pump it up with your own company data. If you have a history of, say, code and bugs, and you pump it with this, it can say, well, historically, doing something like this would cause bugs. Go and investigate and things like that. Maybe at the moment, who is not aware of Quick Check? Who doesn't know what Quick Check is? Okay, a couple of people in the room. Quick Check is a testing tool for Haskell that is, you give it a model, you say these are numbers, these are strings, whatever. It comes up with lots of weird test cases to try to break your software. And it automatically does that when it finds kind of this, and then it narrows the range and tries to find something that would kind of cause it to break. So this is like not really deterministic testing, it's non-deterministic testing. It's pumping it automatically with a bunch of things, but it's doing it for numbers and strings and like data types. Now, with ChatGPT, we can do this on a more domain concept. You can say, well, we have a banking application. With a banking application, we have some people, some accounts and things like that. Come up with like 5 million new test cases. I don't have to trust it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be accurate. It needs to come up with 5 million test cases very quickly that fill in this data that I can pump into the system and see if something weird happens. So maybe that's something where we don't need to trust it fully. Or something like that. Again, contextual bug inspections and things like that, where we can ask it like, well, does this bug propose where this bug is in the code, so I don't have to debug it that much. It doesn't have to be correct. It needs to kind of point me in the right direction. Or if I spend 10 minutes and realize it's a waste of time, I can do something else. But it might save me time, like with this Dart example. Automated A/B tests, again, are something that could be quite interesting. I was quite surprised some of the A/B tests I've done on my application, like moving a title to a different row and rephrasing a title increased my revenue by 10%. It's like insane. So maybe this can come up with a bunch of proposals that you can do without a UX expert, and then it can run some automated tests. The next step can run some automated tests on real users.
Would another line be there? Test for legal compliance for design, privacy and security by design.
Well, absolutely, and this could you could teach it what personal information is and what secure information is, and it could come up with kind of these things. By the way, in terms of legal and compliance documentation, a friend of mine who has his own company, they've gone through SOC 2 compliance recently. And part of SOC 2 compliance is creating a disaster recovery plan that has to have certain elements and things like that. And instead of writing it himself, he went on to ChatGPT and said, here's 5 elements I'd like you to come up with, put into a disaster recovery plan. Go and write me a disaster recovery plan. It should come this long. And they passed compliance, submitting that document.
Yeah.
So disaster waiting to happen. So
Have you ever compared ChatGPT automated code reviews versus existing static code analysis?
So I think they do different things. Static code analysis is analyzing known things. I would expect this to find like the unknowns. I'd expect this to apply patterns to look for different things. I think static code analysis can do quite a lot of stuff, but it's been hand coded by people that know what problems to look for. I'd expect this to happen with kind of finding problems I don't know about. So I think they are really serving different purposes. I think different type of automation. Anyway, yeah. So, sorry. So kind of, but with this stuff, one of the things that's kind of interesting is MDN, the authoritative resource on web development, started automating documentation and ended up with a total disaster, where automated AI documentation was inventing CSS selectors that don't exist, creating code that doesn't work, and things like that. So I think, again, the question of trusting this becomes quite important. And overdoing it now, like that lawyer in New York or MDN, where somebody raised an issue like, I don't want documentation to lie to me, is interesting, because there is this big question of trust. And kind of one of the things, if you go to the image generation thing, it has this kind of variation thing there. It's quite interesting because you can bang, it gives you 5 variations of it. And I thought that was quite interesting because, when you look at the lean kind of manufacturing thing and design thing, they talk about how set-based design is the most effective way to very quickly get to good design, not the cheapest, but most effective way. So effectiveness over efficiency, where you get 5 different people to design the same solution, and then one of them is going to win. It's, when they were launching rockets at the moon, they had 3 different designs, one won, and things like that. But nobody has time to do set-based design. We know that this should be done, but we just don't have time to do it. Now, if I can get ChatGPT to propose 3 different designs for something, it reduces the time to kind of come up with these things, and then we can evaluate it. But then, of course, the big question is, does it make any sense? Because when I asked it to give me like design, it gave me 5 of these kind of horrible images. It didn't give me this. So, if it gets set-based design, but all the designs are rubbish, will we give up? Will we say, this was, it's not a viable product? It's, how do we know that we can trust it? And this is where, again, I've mentioned a couple of laws. Bill Gates has this kind of law, 2 laws of automation. The first law of automation says that automation applied to an efficient process increases efficiency. And the second law is that if you apply automation to an inefficient process, it just magnifies the inefficiency. So, and I think this is, there's a danger of this thing happening. There's a danger of basically just having a horribly inefficient, mass-producing garbage generator machine. But it's going to be glorious. I'm kind of,
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I remember working in a bank some years ago where the whole thing was run on Excel. Every manager made their own little Excel spreadsheet, and they became horribly complicated. I remember one that took 6 hours to complete, so they ran that overnight, and nobody was able to check whether it was even coming up with the right answers. So that, yeah, absolutely right.
This is not any different than that, and that bank probably made a lot of money. So, did they have good software design? Probably not. Were they successful as a business? Probably yes. I mean, so that's an interesting thing to think about. So, kind of the final thing that is this kind of really question of trust and question of how we can look at it. And this is I like to kind of show you this photo because it was generated by a new tool called generated photos. Generated.photos. If you go to this URL, you can actually see this picture. And I don't know kind of if people here go to the gym or if they've kind of gone to the gym recently, but does anybody see anything wrong with this picture? Like, obviously, what's wrong?
Well, that dumbbell doesn't help.
So yeah, we have like 20 kilos on one side and like 200 on this. Yeah. So this is going to crash immediately and hurt a leg, or who knows? This is a very dangerous situation. But kind of zooming out of this picture, this becomes really interesting. Kind of, it looks like this. I have no idea how, what exercises to do to get 2 more arms. I think it would be really useful to speed up my programming because I can use like at least 2 more keyboards. But so this is kind of really the problem. It's something that looks reasonable. It might hide stuff we have no idea about. A code that looks reasonable might be horribly wrong. MDN documentation can mislead you. And looking at the number of people using ChatGPT to create code and execute it without even thinking about this. is really scary for me because those two people that sent me emails were calling a non-existent endpoint. If somebody was able to do a supply chain attack on that, so that for a popular product, it injects their own endpoint that looks like Microsoft.com, but it's not Microsoft.com, it's Microsoft.com. Botswana or whatever. People will be running this stuff without even thinking. And posting company data out and things like that.
You know what engine they use for the AI?
A piston engine, I think.
The reason I ask the question is because that's the main problem. Because if people don't know how the results have been produced, how do they know what sort of data to give it? And at the moment, I think ChatGPT has got the whole web to search for answers. So it's almost like Microsoft. For example, if you get a new version of Windows, there are bugs in it. And you have to wait for a number of people to phone up and say there's a bug here and there. By the end of it, it's okay, and then you get a new version. But the point is, you need the time for those. With such a complicated system, it's impossible to work out all the problems, and you need that time to. So that's the reason. That's the first reason why they've actually thrown it at the public.
Absolutely.
You need people will actually work out that there are problems here, there, and the other, and it'll be. So the point is that to take it as it is at the moment is a problem, because obviously there's the trust issue, and there are so many bugs in the system. And the other point, there are many avenues for creating engines for AI. AI is not a magic word. There are.
It is a magic word. Everybody likes AI.
That's what I'm saying. Anybody who doesn't know about artificial intelligence will actually use the word AI for anything.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment I help in a pharmacy, and they use AI for the ordering system. So anybody will use
Magic.
AI, because nobody actually, I mean, can you define what AI is apart from the artificial intelligence? What makes something AI as opposed to not?
Yeah. I mean, you're raising some really interesting questions, but one of the things you said is to take it as it is. Again, there's certain use cases where it's perfectly fine. There's certain use cases where you should be arrested and thrown in prison for trying something like this. But at the same time, I put it to it's people have been producing untrustworthy software and claiming that it's correct for a long time. Look at the kind of post office Horizon scandal now. That was done by humans. That, our industry is seeing a shift in the last kind of 10 years or so. Programmers are going to prison.
I don't think you can blame the programmers.
Absolutely you can.
I think you need to blame the people who actually give out the contracts, because these people don't know anything about IT. They're put in those positions. Somebody comes in with a very good mouth, telling that their particular way of developing is the best. And these people, because all they know is what somebody tells them, will actually jump at it.
Yeah, I understand. But so, but now we're getting sidetracked, but I think, there is a professional responsibility that we have as people and as professionals. And I think kind of the people are starting to go to prison for not kind of having this professional responsibility. If somebody from Volkswagen comes and says, you should create a cheating engine, and you do it, and you know really well that you're kind of breaking the law. That is, breaking the law. Now, there's no way around it. People did not used to go to prison for that. They're starting to go to prison now.
But that's what Microsoft does all the time. And everything.
But yeah, I said the industry is changing. I mean,
lawyers.
The industry is changing. I mean, yesterday I read the news that they charged the chief information security officer of SolarWinds for not being, doing his job responsibly. And that's the first time I know that somebody's been charged for having security bugs in software. It's like, so we are getting, this whole thing is going to be really interesting. And I think some of these things are solvable by technology in the future. Some of the things are not. Some of these things have been in the industry for a long time. I mean, I don't know how Excel works. There's been this thing where people have been renaming, there was a genome being renamed because Excel continuously replaces kind of data that looks like dates and flips it around in a different form. So you know, people have been putting out horrible software for a long time, and you know, some of it was unsuccessful, some of it was wildly successful, and I think you know, it's just going to be we're reducing the bar to produce this stuff. You used to need 20 people for something, now you're going to need like 1 hour to do it on your own. And that's the kind of interesting thing. Now, will it come out like this?
It's interesting what you say about Excel, because when Solvency II came out and was applied to the insurance business, insurance companies went through their networks like a dose of salts and started deleting thousands of spreadsheets because of spreadsheet error. And every underwriter had his own little spreadsheet on his machine that was taken away from him. He said, no, you have to use a system which is programmed and tested and controlled centrally. So that caused a huge disruption in the industry, in the insurance industry. Absolutely knew, you know, about spreadsheet error.
So yeah, and that's a really nice example of, you know, like the systemic thing where it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew, and then somebody said, well, you know, but then again,
I was asked to develop a system, design a system, and my internal client gave me a spreadsheet. I said, well, he said, put that on the website. That is definitely not going on the website. And we developed a system which we could test for expected outcomes, and which we could do a lot of other features which he'd never thought about, and it worked.
Yeah. You know, I like every person in a bank I've ever worked with, every person in insurance company I've worked with, they would be happiest in their life if they only talk to Excel. That's the way they think now. That it's not. And again, that's like this general purpose tool, general purpose interface. I've worked on I don't know how many systems that are trying to kind of replicate the Excel interface for people, but underneath they have, you know, so much other complexity and things like that. And I think, again, the point I'm trying to make is I think we are going to see a general purpose interface win. Maybe it's going to be ChatGPT, maybe it's going to be something else. And that will like democratize, or not democratize, but it will lower the bar for producing software. It will lower the bar. Now whether it will increase the quality of software, I don't know. But generally, kind of, if you look at the quality of software being produced now, it's not that good. Will we hear, you know, more IT disasters? Yes, we will. But then again, is it any different than what's going on now? So I think there's lots of use cases where we can't use it and will not be able to use it. Security and things like this. There's some things where I was quite surprised how well it's doing it, and that's kind of really what I'm coming to next. Ben Evans has this wonderful blog post, and he's thinking about AI chatbots and things like that as interns. Interns you can't trust, but they can do work.
Speaking of blog posts, my company encourages all of us to be active on social networks.
Brilliant. So you can generate content.
They provided a tool called Halo, which will write your article for you. You just give it a few keywords and it just writes it.
So why do you need to be there in the first place?
I think actually on social media, now the majority of postings are actually generated by AI.
And what's brilliant about that, I know the other side of that painting. So as a small business owner, you know, they said, you know, your company is doing that so that it can bring people through the website to you. But you're kind of probably somewhere in the loop. Like I see the whole loop with my product. So my loop is basically content generated by other people ranks somehow on Google. Google sends you traffic. Now, there are tools that analyze Google to say, for this keyword, the content needs to look like this. So it can rank. I use these tools to kind of create content. Then, given these keywords, now you can use Halo to kind of generate the content, and then it goes in and just So it's going to be AI feeding shit to other AIs to rank. It's going to feed shit to kind of some languages to meta engines to analyze. It's going to say, oh, now this is ranking. And it's insane. I mean, we're going to see so much garbage on the internet as a result of this stuff. It already is very difficult to find useful stuff there. It used to be like, I remember I was doing part-time work for a magazine in 99. And I did a article on 20 search engines on the internet. It was 20 then. It was Alexa, there was Lycos, there was Alta Vista, there was, there were a bunch of things. And I was, I remember writing about this kind of new and up and coming tool called google.stanford.edu. That was the domain, and how it has this new approach and how it's really interesting. And it's the whole thing is, Google back then was a lot more useful than Google now, because it's been, it's a self-reinforcing loop of all the garbage that's generated there. That's really interesting. Anyway, so Ben Evans talks about this thing as kind of consider it's an intern. And it's an intern that knows some stuff you might not know. You might not know Dart. There's an intern coming from a university that knows Dart as a programming language. Or you might not know some business logic rules about something, maybe somebody else knows. But these things are kind of, you have to check. That they can do anything for you, but you have to check. And he's talking about this thing being like infinite interns. And a really interesting part of that is no company has infinite interns. Interns do not have a financial cost. You don't pay interns, but interns have a human cost. You have to have somebody working with the interns. Use them effectively. And nobody has an infinite number of interns in their team. That would be insane. But now we have the capacity to have infinite interns. And this really is then, I like treating ChatGPT as a junior developer. So I tell it, like, go and do this. And then, I can read and I can say, well, out of the 200 lines you wrote, I see that this one is wrong. But I don't use it kind of mindlessly because I wouldn't deploy something that an intern does to production. And kind of now, given this kind of context of infinite interns, I was hoping we do something practical. So I'll kind of do 15 minutes of this, self-organize into groups and brainstorm what would infinite interns be able to do better than you can. Maybe writing, this, whatever. What you can do better than infinite interns. Where the number of interns doing this really doesn't matter. You're so much on a different plane of work that this is it. And some things that you think technically infinite interns will have, it doesn't matter how much the technology improves, they will never be able to kind of do better than you in terms of your work. Like drawing an architectural diagram from a piece of code, well, probably somebody can already do that. But some kind of meta level stuff based on it. So I'd like to kind of do this for 15 minutes. And then we'll have another round of kind of something to see if we're right or not. And then we can have some drinks and pizza, I think. How much do we have? How have I kind of gone over time?
We're doing fine. Normally we finish 8-ish, plus or minus.
Okay. So let's do 10 minutes of this and then we'll do something else. So self-organize into smaller groups. Brainstorm a bit, think about these three things.
Hello. I'm Damian. Yuri.
So you do lots of very. We're the first person in the UK to talk about this.
Problem for us is last year we went to outsourcing.
Maybe take some notes as you talk.
So we absolutely ended
Like when you
It's a paper, maybe take some notes as you discuss things. Piece of paper.
We need a pen as well.
Piece of paper, take some notes, maybe you can put together. And
so now I get rung up. Felt to
the chairs around, the chairs are.
Do that by
Please form small circles. Turn the chairs around. Let's
run out of time to restore the system.
Okay. It's small group. They didn't define small.
Their
Well, it's
advantage.
You work for IT, did you unite?
and it turned out one thing
That I
they
used to do.
was to work out what themselves had done wrong,
Well, since I used to do.
how their interpretation of simplification was.
They cannot put the product there won't be interns there if they
What they can do better than you.
That can do with one problem at a time, yeah.
You know,
What can they do better than me? I don't touch I don't touch BAU anymore. I'm a third line support person now.
Yeah, so what
What used to be my full-time job staff turned into an expert third line support. Every time they come up with something they haven't seen.
Oh, you say, well, so you do better than them.
Create the solutions for them to follow.
Biased, but interns, you can have different aspects.
Do better
From
than
the ID, I would say, ID integration.
because you have a map coding. So you wanna,
I mean, probably yeah, better, like actually.
Okay, so you want, you do something. Right.
Kind of knowledge that.
I wanted to do my course in cybersecurity. I think thing is, so I'm doing one.
Maybe you are.
exception handling.
Side. Different proposals for those. If you are on your or left with, then you.
By exception handling, you mean handling the hidden code.
They don't. Outside of the.
The help desk for something that they haven't got information about them. What the answer is.
Call center. Outside the.
For example, we must spend 10 minutes running it against people call center eventually said, can I speak to your manager? They have an infinite number of ways of excusing the fact that the manager is doesn't.
I was doing.
It's gonna be very similar.
Not forward.
Never be able to.
And actually ever do too.
When I was there.
No, I mean, should it be two or should it be three?
It's 1, 2, 3. Exception handling.
Exception handling three, that's what I'm saying.
Establish a correct process in the first place.
You can do better than this. Well, you could say at the moment. I mean, you're talking about artificial. It's artificial. It's not. It's actually not intelligent.
In our work. And let's summarize that quickly and then let's take a pizza break.
We had the, I suppose ultimately. To decide whether whatever comes out is good or not.
To decide. But
So we have to, so that whatever comes out, we can verify it, we can use it to do work or test or use it in our tests.
Mhm.
We still have to ultimately make that decision.
Is that what it does better than?
So I think
No,
that
this was
what
what.
we'll never be able to do.
Yes, that's what we'll never be able to do, yes.
We're doing this one. These two were kind of to prompt you to think about this one, really.
Okay,
So I want to know about this one.
okay.
Kind of, so evaluating the outcome. So one of the really interesting things, and I stole this from a talk by Craig Larman I saw a while ago. And it kind of the reference was to like computers before machines, people with the job role of a computer who would work out a really complex formula and you know figure out the end result. And people giving them the task of doing that were not able to evaluate whether that's true or not. But what they used to do is you'd like hire 3 computers to spend a week computing, and then if they all 3 of them come up with the same results, independently, that makes, it's a reasonable assumption that that's correct. So what the kind of the reference to what I'm talking about here is somebody said, well, how do you check what ChatGPT is doing? Well, you get like Google's thing to do the same thing, or you get 3 of these engines to produce, and if it's a similar result or if it's equal enough, then there's a reasonable assumption that not all 3 are wrong at the same time.
But as a friend at the back said, with 3 people, you know that they are, as it were, not cheating or whatever. They're doing it independently. While the potential is that something that's out there in the unknown.
Of course. So yes, there is, of course, the potential for cheating and self-reinforcing and influencing. But it's an interesting thing, kind of, to think about that. So deciding this, evaluating the outcome, is an interesting thing to look at. What else?
This wasn't in our group, but I've thought of it since this conversation. I'm just wondering whether AI will ever come up with new scientific engineering concepts. Would AI ever come up with Newton's laws of motion, or the second law of thermodynamics, or a bunch of other things?
Like, okay, so that's slightly outside of my work. I doubt it. That's kind of, I'm not doing scientific engineering concepts in my work, so I can't tell you about that. But I think asking it to be creative is kind of stretching the definition of creativity a bit. If it can create paintings and music, it can come up with this stuff. But is it any good? So, as an example, I had a good friend of mine is a business analyst, and he works at he works for gambling companies. So if you're not into kind of horse racing, you probably don't know this, but it's like 4 rules of how horse racing is priced in terms of kind of stuff in the UK. It comes from something called the Tattersall's Jockey Club, where jockeys kind of decided what to do. Rule number 4 deals with what happens if a horse that was supposed to win the race ends up in a ditch, dead just before the race, and the bookies have already taken bets. It's kind of one of these weird things where you have to go back and recalculate history, and so it's where most betting systems go to die. Like when you have to implement rule 4, your nice design becomes a mess. And to kind of think about rules and things like that, we were playing with this, and I asked ChatGPT, kind of with this friend of mine sitting, like, explain rule 4 with examples. The perfect introduction, really good examples you could use to evaluate. It was incredibly surprising. So that's one of the interview questions for a junior business analyst, would be something like that. Nailed it perfect. And this friend of mine was like shocked, and then I said, explain rule 5. Rule 5 doesn't exist. Generated some bullshit. Examples. So it can be incredibly good and incredibly bad at the same time. Generating new, can it come up with new concepts? Yes, it can. Will they be any good? I don't know. I know that I read last week that some scientists in the US used AI-assisted processes to get a new antibiotic in place.
Yeah, exactly, because the AI is given the dosage and the function of the medicine, but then it's being combined in ways that have been done before.
So infinite interns, you get so.
Yes, there are currently algorithms that are able to do that, like genetic algorithms that can actually do that. You give them a set of designs, and they can work out what the best one is. These are just simple. They've been around for ages. So is that really AI?
Again, AI is kind of a term that captures marketing imagination. It's not, you have LLMs, you have symbolic AI, you have all of this other stuff. There's, people have been working on I mean, is this really any different than saying, well, it's running on a computer, it's software?
Yes, that's right. The point is that at the end of the day, you get the different options that you yourself probably, who programmed it, would not come up with.
Potentially, yeah.
Things outside the box from your particular imagination. So you get all these options, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's not for everything, but it's potentially helpful for some things. Okay, so new scientific concepts, I probably not. Anything else?
Empathize.
Empathize. Oh, okay. What are you thinking about it? What part of your job is kind of empathizing and
I'm an economist.
Mhm.
So you empathize by sitting opposite somebody and interacting with them personally.
Okay, so kind of personal touch,
Bedside manner.
bedside manner. Okay,
Right, yes.
okay. That's kind of so you know, for stuff like that, we still need humans.
I mean, that's, I don't know. If it is about policy making and stuff, you don't really have to empathize in order to be able to make, it helps, but not necessarily make best decisions by empathizing. Like you can still like model things and see, like if you poke here, such and such thing happens. And
Well, empathizing is putting yourself in the position of the other person.
no, I get that helps.
It's a human thing.
It absolutely is, but it's maybe it's not the only way to come up with the solution of a
Well,
problem.
What, I mean, for example, what's going to happen at universities and education systems is that we'll return to oral examinations in person.
Yeah, and somebody's then going to do speech to text, and then an LLM that analyzes that text and scale it. So you will have, you know, the worst of all worlds, because somebody's going to do a garbage in, garbage out queue on automating that.
If you're sitting in, I mean, if they choose to do that, but if they stick with the old-fashioned 3-person panel interviewing a candidate for an examination,
And so, you know,
tutorial,
things like
that's how
that.
it used to be done.
Things like
years
that
ago.
don't scale, and I think we're at the point where some things are gonna be descaled, and you know they will no longer need to scale that much. But I think for scale, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it is an interesting thing where looking at this whole kind of human connection, human decision making is definitely not something I'd expect a machine to be able to do. So that's a good point. Anything else? What else have you come up with?
Olivia came up with one. She said, work out, settle, or negotiate a complaint. I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I guess what kind of complaint? That's an interesting question.
Olivia, you can
Empathise.
so explain that.
That's empathy.
But you don't necessarily always get empathy from people settling.
Oh yeah, there's plenty of humans can't do it.
And maybe agreed on the empathy, but it's having to link the complaint with satisfying your business objectives. You can be more subtle about getting a good result
We'll talk about how it
with nuances. Yeah.
That requires empathizing.
What about in 20 years' time?
Well, I guess it's an interesting thing. So, you know, working out or settling a complaint, there's already all these arbitration kind of services and things like that that are not necessarily, I mean, they're all precedent based. So pattern matching is brilliant for precedent based stuff. I assume you can build out like a precedent matching engine, even with like you don't need kind of LLMs and things like that for that. So I would be curious about this. I think, you know, driving
Minutes
down
ago,
the
you
road-
said that it invented Rule 5, and now you're saying that it's gonna come up with the.
I'm not saying it
No, I
will
get
do-
that, but it's quite a leap.
it will do stuff. Will it do better or worse than humans? That's an interesting thing. You know, if you go for like an arbitration settlement with something's going to go through the precedents, and you know, do you need a human to do that or not? Do you need something to, you know, pull out things?
If the complaint relates to an ethical dilemma.
So yeah, ethical and moral stuff is an interesting thing. And there was a case. I was reading about this a while ago about like ethics and morality and automation, where kind of in a no-win scenario with automated driving, where somebody has to get hurt. Who decides who gets hurt? And there's this of course, babies are involved because that's how you get people to kind of cringe in their stomach. But it was like, a car can't stop. There's a malfunction with the car. A car can't stop. It can either, hurt a mother and a baby, or it can run into a crowd. So a large number of people, but not
MIT had that on their website for a lot of years with 13 different variations on that.
Yeah. And
we're researching public attitudes to programming a car to kill.
Or kill the driver. In which case, if you know the car is programmed to kill you, you would probably not buy that car. So, and I actually in Germany a couple of months ago at a conference, and somebody said from the audience that the German courts have kind of resolved this. The German courts have basically said you're prohibited from developing any software that optimizes for any case there. So in Germany, basically the car needs to continue doing whatever it's doing. And solving that problem is illegal. But so because you're not, but then again, that's Germany. UK might be different. UK might be like, if you are.
I was recently in San Francisco, and they have automated taxi cabs there. And my sister-in-law saw a week or two earlier, which then hit the newspapers here, a taxi which was stopped in a street where the fire brigade were fighting a fire, and they waved it to go back, and it just stopped. It wouldn't go back because it had hit an exception to its program, and it didn't know what to do, so it froze. And one taxi company there has just lost their license, I think. I don't know why. But you're talking about 3 laws of robotics, really, aren't you?
Well, I mean, potentially, yeah. Or rule 4 that ChatGPT is going to invent. Okay, so we have kind of, I think this settling complaints and things like that, I'm not so sure about, but we'll see. Anything else?
No, I just wanted to comment as I came up with that one. I like it. True, that's a good point. If the solutions rely on precedent, then we've heard in other, let's say, legal cases, that the AI will be very good in finding precedents, subject to what you said at the beginning of your talk, that they were fake references. But otherwise, assuming that it's good, that's actually a useful tool for the interns. Okay, thank you.
I just think like it can never do surgery.
It already does.
I mean,
like a heart surgery or like brain surgery. Not sure.
So okay, that's interesting because I guess I can't speak to that. I'm not. But there's an aspect of like precision there, which I think machines are already kind of better than humans. There's an aspect of training that, again, and there's an aspect of figuring out what you need to find and things like that. There was a case, something called Radboud University, I think in Netherlands. They used radiology images where they knew the outcome of the analysis at the end. They had a database of these things that they're doing to test human radiologists. And they ended up basically, Google cooked up a pattern matching machine that was able to analyze these images. And the pattern matching machine was able to achieve 83% accuracy, where the best human they had achieved 75. So again, I'm not a surgeon. I really shouldn't be talking about this, but mechanical precision machines are already better. Like detection and things like that, machines are already better. Empathizing, totally different thing. So there will be.
No, you're going on to the next. I mean, what they can do better than you, and you put me in mind of a brilliant scenario, which is the military. They're continually situation training, aren't they? So human beings are not very good at coming up with possible scenarios that they'd have to deal with. I think an AI could do a brilliant job there.
We have a famous movie with Matthew Broderick doing that in the 80s. It's called War Games, where he randomly finds a BBS where he phones with the phone line, and then it says login, and then he says help login, and then it helps him login. And then basically says, what game would you like to play? It says global thermonuclear destruction, and then, you know, so.
It's actually in ergonomics, one of the things that humans are not good at is vigilance tasks. That's why people on radar screens with a finger over a missile button are switched out every 20 to 40 minutes. The same with security staff at the airports, because they're not good at it. Their attention drifts. Machines would be better at that, but not necessarily making the final decision, but spotting the problem.
So if you have infinite interns recognizing something's wrong, and then you have a human kind of maybe, you know, taking a decision there. But then again, you know, given what we had in the government recently, would those people be able to make a better decision than I don't know.
I was reminded of the very old saying that it used to be around when I was a child. The operation was a success, but the patient died.
So I think, you know, for these things to be useful, they don't need to be perfect. They need to be better than what we have at the moment. Okay, anything else?
Continuous learning.
So that's an interesting one. What do you think of
This is like, let's say, learning a new subject or something. If the AI now obviously has access to the whole of the internet, it's already learnt it. It's already grabbed it, boom, done. It already knows. It's just the data is there. It just acquired it. So the only thing it will learn is sort of improving itself to do that, but it won't only learn something new, the subjects. It's just
okay, yeah. So I think, you know, and things like that is interesting.
PG, can you feed my dog?
You know, so you know, the data that's there is there, but the question is, does it, you know, does it get new data as it's coming up and things like that? And I think this is one of the kind of the pain points of current technologies. It's really expensive to retrain, and that's why I think, you know, we are not getting fixes for these things easily. Like if ChatGPT is continuously generating a wrong API endpoint, I'm probably better off just implementing that endpoint than getting it to change. But yeah, that would be, you know, that is an interesting challenge to figure out, you know, how this would be done. Okay.
And the other one is obviously, you know, the bot test. They'll never be able to do.
Capture.
They're already doing they're already doing, I mean, ChatGPT is already solving captures.
Really?
Yes. You can upload the capture. There was a thing on Twitter, you can upload the capture and ask it to say what's in the image. It does it kind of better than I do it.
I thought captures was also used in your browser history as well, to be able to then recognize if it's
browser history is trivial easy to fake, isn't it? It's kind of so captures ChatGPT can already solve captures. It's image recognition. These things are better than, I mean, now you have these motion captures that basically have to move things around and things like that. But again, you know, that's it's a losing game.
I think we need to think about winding up.
Okay, let's wind it up. I do want to leave you with a final challenge of like picking one of these and you know, tomorrow logging onto ChatGPT or something like that and actually trying to get it to do that. And then reporting back the results. Maybe you can publish the kind of things.
Did that.
So sorry.
I already did that.
Okay, and
The 5 answers, the 5 things.
okay. So
Form relationship, understand context, have common sense.
Okay.
Creative and original.
Okay. Well, you know, hey, we have an answer. So yeah, maybe kind of try out one of these things and then report back if it actually did something reasonable. You know, give it to dispute to settle. See what it says. And let's have pizza now. Thank you very much.
Common sense. Beware of.
So everyone just appears. Let me just tell you,
The
the next
common
month we've got
sense.
another very
Many
related subject.
Yes.
Tarek, who was a guest here a couple
Sorry,
of
it's
months
flat.
ago, is going to talk about
We
another
analysed it.
AI related topic.
Yeah.
So
but common sense is very good.
And
Can be
we'll
very
be back in January.
Potentially.
Common sense depends on what you can see, feel, or analyze at that point.
There's a very good one about common. If you're.
Thank you very much. Hopefully it was not.